tutoring online with Outschool is a great way to grow your online teacher business and develop a steady stream of income. Now, many teachers though believe that tutoring or having one-on-one classes is a little bit too much work and not really worth it financially. Well, in today's video, I'm actually going to share with you 5 actionable tips or ways you can actually save time when you are planning your one-on-one tutoring classes so it can be financially worth it for you. Tip number 1 is to pick a niche. Now, as an Outschool or online teacher, you probably hear this phrase a lot, that picking a niche is very, very important. It really helps your teacher business grow. But this is especially important if you want to save time as you're planning your tutoring or one-on-one classes. Lesson planning and prep is a lot easier when all of the students that have signed up for your classes are in one specific niche. Now, you're going to see why in my future tips that I'm going to share with you, but I'm just going to share some examples of actual niches you can have if you want to tutor or provide one-on-one classes through Outschool. So for example, for me, I love to tutor reading and writing classes for early elementary students, so K1 and 2, so that's my niche. Early elementary reading. Now, you can have a niche on basically anything. There are some people that have a niche in handwriting, maybe basic handwriting for like kindergarten, first grade students. You could also have a niche of photography, learning about the basics of photography, becoming a new photographer. You might also have the niche of advanced guitar or a specific instrument where the student already has background on that instrument, but you're teaching them more in-depth information about playing that instrument. So there are so many different niches you can have when you're creating your Outschool listings and Outschool classes, but pick a specific niche for those one-on-one lessons when you're first starting. This will really, really help your lesson planning and your prep become a lot easier. Tip number 2 is to create templates, games, and resources that you can use over and over again in your online classes. Now, this is actually why tip number 1 is so important. It is so important that you pick a niche so then when you're actually starting to create classes, or create resources and create games and create things for your tutoring classes, it's a lot easier. You can basically think of this as you creating your own online library or resource library. And again, I'm going to share examples of kind of what I mean by this. So as I said in tip number 1, my specific tutoring niche, or one of my tutoring niches, is early elementary for reading, and I will also include phonics in that category. So since that is my niche and I have so many students within that niche, I have started to create a resource library specific to that niche. So I have created different CVC games or CVCE games, lots of phonics games I've created. I've created different worksheets that tie into phonics and reading. I've also created presentations where students write CVC words and read CVC words, spell CVC words. I've created different assessments for sight words and CVC words. And again, some of those phonics skills. I've also created short stories, CVC stories and sight word stories. So I've created a lot of different resources within my niche, creating basically my own resource library. And since I've created so many different resources and I have so many different resources in my library, I do not have to be constantly creating new lessons, new resources, new games for every single student I get. I'm able to repeat and use those resources over and over and over again with newer and even older students. So creating resources and games and activities that are specific towards your niche are super helpful when you're trying to kind of speed up the process of your planning time in regards to your tutoring or one-on-one classes. Tip number 3 is very similar to tip number 2, and that is to purchase resources, games, or activities that are related to your specific niche so you can use them over and over again. And again, this is basically me sharing that you're creating your own resource library. Now, as an Outschool or an online teacher or a tutor, you do have to be careful because everything you purchase cannot be used in the online classroom, but there are many resources you can actually invest in that you can use with your students that can stay in that resource library. For example, I invested in a program known as Reading A to Z, and I decided to invest in this program because it provides tons of leveled readers. And since I am teaching so many reading students, I wanted a big library of books that I could use with my students without copyright issues online. I know some teachers like to find resources on TPT, and TPT has great resources for many teachers. Again, you just have to be careful because not all of the TPT sellers allow their resources to be used online, but there's so many places you can find good resources that you can purchase and then build up your own resource library. And if you're new here, I would quickly like to share with you that I do have a TPT shop, and all of my products in my TPT shop are able or are allowed on Outschool and other platforms like it. So if you are interested in checking out my TPT shop where I share products very much focused on like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, that might be a good resource for you. But you are able to buy resources. Like, it is completely okay to spend a little bit of money if you don't have the time to create your own resources. So then when you're actually planning those one-on-one classes, the planning process is a lot quicker because you're not always having to think, okay, what am I gonna do with this specific student, and have to recreate the wheel basically every single time. Also, I wanted to quickly mention, I have been doing a little bit of research of what TPT authors or creators usually allow Outschool teachers to use their resources. I will list some of those in the description box, but please keep in mind, still do your extra research. Some of these I learned about a few months ago, so they might have changed their term of use. Just always make sure before you purchase something that you're allowed to use it with your online students or your tutoring students. Tip number 4 to help you save on your planning time is to have a simple lesson plan format. It is so much easier to plan your lessons if you keep the same format every single class. And I'm going to give you an example of basically what I like to do for my lesson plans. So I've talked on my channel before kind of about my setup, but all of my tutoring classes start with a quick warm-up activity that takes 5 minutes or less. After that warm-up activity, I do one larger activity together, which takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And then our last activity is a review game. So that is always the format I have for my online tutoring students. So it's very, very easy for every time I'm planning a tutoring class for me to just follow that format and think of an activity for each of those. So for every single student, I have to think of a warm-up activity. I have to think of a large activity, and then I have to think of a game. And the great thing is I can go to my resource library, pick things from my resource library, and plug it into that lesson plan format. So it is extremely, extremely helpful to have a simple lesson plan format that you follow for all of your students. And again, it just makes that planning process so much quicker and a little bit easier. Now, if you want a better example of exactly how I personally plan my online tutoring classes, I actually have a tutoring freebie that I will have linked down below. And in that freebie, I have my lesson plan template, and I actually give you a sample lesson that you can kind of look over to help you get ideas of what you can do with your online classes. If you have not even started tutoring on Outschool, that is also a great resource for you, because in that resource, I guide you step by step how to make your listing, how to do the description box, thumbnail, all that fun stuff. So if you are planning on tutoring on Outschool, highly, highly recommend that completely free resource. Tip number 5 is to write down immediately after class a very simple and brief lesson plan for the next class to follow. Now, this is something I recently did, and it saves so much time. So before my lesson, as I've talked on here before, I'm a very much paper pencil kind of teacher. So I actually write down my lesson plan for every single student every single week, and I just write like 3 or 4 different things. So going back to that simple lesson plan format, I write down our warm-up activity, our major activity, and then the game we're gonna play. So I always write that down on a piece of paper. Then right after class, or actually first, during class, as we're doing the activities, I check off the activity completed and I write down if the activity was easy, if it was just right, or if it was a little difficult, to kind of help me determine if that activity worked well for the student, if they still need practice with that skill, or if that skill is kind of mastered. Once the lesson is over, because usually in between my classes, I have 5 to 15 minutes in between every class, I write down quickly a simple lesson plan idea for the following class. Now, I don't start gathering my resources until the next week, just in case the student can't make it that week or they end up canceling our lessons together, but I write down my ideas for the following lesson. For example, let's say during my lesson together for our warm-up activity, me and my student wrote down 5 CVC short A words. And then for my main activity, we read a CVC story and answered questions. And then for my review game, we played a board game that had CVC words. So you can see I had a pretty simple lesson plan. And during the lesson, I'll actually check off, okay, me and my student wrote down those 5 CVC words. You know, they were able to do it, but they still kind of needed some help or practice. So that means the following week, I'm probably still going to continue with those short A words. Then I will do the next thing. Okay, the student did really well with that story. I think it was a perfect level. I'm going to pick another story at a similar level to read with them next time. And then the same thing for the game. So I've noticed that doing this just makes the lesson planning time a lot quicker the following week, because all I have to really do is gather all of my resources that are in that resource library to help me plan my lesson for that student for the week. So as you can see, tutoring on Outschool or tutoring online is a great source of income for many online teachers and teacherpreneurs. It can require some work, a little bit of extra work in the beginning, but once you have that system down, it is definitely worth your time and energy. And I hope these 5 tips that I shared with you today are tips that you can actually apply in your own online teacher business to systematize and just make the planning process a little bit quicker and easier for you. Now, if you found this video helpful, make sure you give it a thumbs up and you don't forget to subscribe to my channel. On this channel, I share lots of different videos specifically about online teaching, teacherpreneur life, TPT, and more. And if any of those topics interest you, you definitely want to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss my future videos and my future content. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video very soon.